What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to face a barrage of disrespectful questions and condescending remarks that push him to his absolute limit? In just 29 seconds of one particular exchange, a legendary movie star would make a decision that would stun everyone watching. A decision to stand up, to walk away, and to show the world that some lines simply cannot be crossed, no matter who is asking the questions. And this is the story of that moment. The moment when patience ran out. The moment when respect demanded action. The moment when Harrison Ford decided he had heard enough. The studio lights were hot, almost unbearably hot, beating down on the small interview set like a miniature sun. The cameras were rolling, their red lights blinking steadily, capturing every moment, every expression, every word. Harrison Ford sat across from Piers Morgan in what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional interview. Nothing special, nothing unusual, just another stop on the press tour. Ford had done thousands of these over his decades-long career. Literally thousands. He knew the routine better than anyone. A few questions about his latest project, some light banter about his iconic roles, maybe a personal question or two about family or hobbies, and then everyone shakes hands, just smiles for the camera, and moves on to the next interview. Simple, professional, respectful. The makeup artist had just finished touching up his face moments before, making sure there was no shine under the lights. The sound technician had clipped the small wireless microphone to his collar, adjusting it carefully to make sure it picked up his voice clearly. Everything was set. Everything was ready. The producers had given the signal. It should have been easy, comfortable, routine. But from the very first moments, from the very second the camera started rolling, something felt different. Something felt wrong. Morgan had that look in his eye, that unmistakable glint that said he was not interested in a normal conversation. He wanted to make a moment. He wanted to create drama. He wanted to push buttons and see what would happen. He wanted to be the center of attention, even if it meant disrespecting his guest. He wanted to prove something. To show everyone watching that he was not afraid to ask the hard questions, to challenge even the biggest stars, to go where other interviewers would not dare to go. Ford settled into his chair, adjusting his posture slightly, his expression neutral but alert. His decades of experience had taught him to read people, to sense when an interview might go sideways. And his instincts were telling him that this one might be trouble. But he had dealt with difficult interviewers before. When he had sat across from people who tried to provoke him, who asked uncomfortable questions, who wanted to get a reaction. He could handle this, or so he thought. Morgan leaned back in his chair, getting comfortable, spreading his arms slightly, establishing his dominance in his own studio. This was his territory, his rules, his show, his kingdom. And he was going to make sure everyone knew it, especially his guest. Morgan started with a smile, but there was something sharp underneath it. Something calculated, something almost predatory. Harrison Ford, welcome to the show. It is wonderful to have you here. You know, I have to say, looking at you now, sitting here in front of me, it is rather remarkable, truly remarkable, that you are still making action films at your age. Most actors your age, actors in their 70s, have moved on to smaller roles, quieter roles, character parts, supporting roles, things that are a bit easier on the body, a bit less physically demanding. Ford's eyes narrowed slightly, just a fraction, but he kept his composure. He had heard this line of questioning before, many times before. The age thing, the past, your prime thing, the you should retire thing. It was tired and predictable and honestly quite boring. Well, I am still capable of doing the work, so I do it. I feel good. I am healthy. I take care of myself, and I enjoy what I do. I love making movies. I love telling stories. Why would I stop doing something I love just because of a number? A reasonable response, a measured response, a professional response. But Morgan was not interested in reasonable. He was not interested in measured. He was interested in conflict. Capable, yes, I am sure you are capable. But surely you must feel the pressure. Morgan pressed, leaning forward now with that self-satisfied grin that seemed permanently etched on his face. I mean, let us be realistic here. Let us be honest with each other. You are not exactly a spring chicken anymore, are you? You are in your 70s. Do you ever worry that audiences might be watching you running around on screen, doing all these stunts, fighting the bad guys, and thinking, you know what? Perhaps it is time for him to hang up the whip and the gun? Perhaps it is time to let the younger generation take over these kinds of roles. Perhaps it is time to step aside and let someone else be the hero. There it was. And the first real jab, disguised as a question, wrapped in concern, but really just a way for Morgan to assert his own superiority, to make his guest feel small, to make himself look clever, to show everyone that he was not afraid to say what others were thinking. Ford took a slow breath. His hands remained still on the armrests, his posture unchanged, his face calm. I do not worry about what other people think. I never have. I worry about doing good work. That has always been my focus. On my entire career, if I am doing good work, if I am telling good stories, if I am giving audiences something worth watching, then that is what matters to me. The rest is just noise, just chatter, just people talking. It was a dignified answer, a thoughtful answer, the kind of answer a professional gives when confronted with an unprofessional question. But Morgan was not satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted to push harder. But surely, Morgan interrupted, not even letting Ford finish his thought completely, waving his hand dismissively as if Ford's answer was somehow insufficient or naive or missing the point entirely. Surely you must acknowledge that Hollywood has changed dramatically. The industry has evolved. Younger actors are taking the roles you used to play. The action heroes now are in their 20s and 30s, not their 70s. They are younger. They are faster. They are more marketable to the key demographic. Do you not feel, I do not know, a bit irrelevant these days? A relic of a different era? Someone who had their time, but that time has passed? The crew behind the cameras shifted uncomfortably. This was getting uncomfortable fast. Really fast. Irrelevant. Relic. These were not the words you used with a legend. These were not the words you used with Harrison Ford. These were not the words you used with someone who had given so much to cinema, who had created characters that would live forever. One camera operator glanced at another, eyebrows raised, a silent question passing between them. Is he really doing this? Is he really going there? This was bad. This was really bad. Everyone could feel it. Ford's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. His hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests, now gripped them just a bit firmer, his knuckles going just a shade whiter. I do not feel irrelevant, no. Yeah, I feel like I am doing the work I want to do, the work I choose to do, and people seem to enjoy it. Audiences seem to respond to it. So no, I do not feel irrelevant at all. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The tension was palpable now. Thick, heavy. You could cut it with a knife. Morgan chuckled, actually chuckled. A short, sharp sound that echoed in the small studio space. As if Ford's response was somehow amusing, or naive, or worthy of mockery. People enjoy it, yes, sure. People enjoy it, but let us be honest here. Let us be brutally honest. Your last few films have not exactly set the box office on fire, have they? I mean, compared to your glory days. Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Blade Runner, those were real hits. Those were cultural phenomena. Those defined generations. Now, Well, it seems like you are just coasting on past success, trading on your name, living off your reputation. Coasting. Another word meant to diminish. Another word meant to belittle. Another word designed to make Ford feel less than what he was. Ford stared at Morgan for a long moment. A very long moment. The kind of stare that could make a person very uncomfortable. The kind of stare that could freeze someone in their tracks. The kind of stare that said, I see exactly what you are doing, and I do not appreciate it. I see through your game. I see through your tactics. I do not think I am coasting, Ford said, his voice lower now, more deliberate, more controlled, each word carefully chosen. I think I am working hard, doing roles that interest me, roles that challenge me, and trying to tell good stories. Stories that matter. If you think that is coasting, then I guess we have very different definitions of the word. Very different understandings of what it means to work in this industry. But Morgan was not backing down. If anything, he seemed emboldened by Ford's restraint. He seemed to take Ford's professionalism as weakness, as an invitation to push even harder. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs casually, the picture of smug confidence, the picture of someone who thought he was winning. Let us talk about your personal life for a moment, Morgan said, shifting gears without warning, without any transition, just pivoting to a completely different topic. You have been married how many times now? 3? 4? I lose count. Some might say you are not exactly great at commitment. Do you think that has affected your ability to connect with audiences? I mean, people like their movie stars to be relatable, do they not? They like to think of them as role models, as people to look up to. And multiple marriages, well, that does not exactly scream stability, does it? The room went silent. Completely silent. Utterly silent. Even the hum of the equipment seemed to fade away. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. The camera operators seemed to freeze. The producers in the control room probably stopped breathing. This was no longer just a difficult interview. This was no longer just uncomfortable questioning. This was a personal attack. This was Morgan crossing a line that should never be crossed. This was him going after Ford's private life, his relationships, his family. This was him using intimate details of a person's life as ammunition in some twisted game. Ford's expression changed, visibly changed. The professionalism, the restraint, it's the patience. All of it began to crack. Not because he was losing control, but because he was making a choice. A conscious choice. A deliberate choice to stop tolerating this behavior. My personal life, Ford said, his voice dangerously calm now, the kind of calm that comes before a storm, is none of your business. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with this interview. And frankly, I do not see how it has anything to do with my work. I came here to talk about my film, not about my marriages, not about my relationships, not about my private life. Morgan waved a hand dismissively, as if Ford's boundary was meaningless, as if his objection was unreasonable. Oh, come on, Harrison. Come on now. You are a public figure. You are famous. You are one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Everything about you is the public's business. That is the price of fame, is it not? That is what you signed up for. And you cannot just pick and choose what people get to know about you. You cannot have it both ways. You want the glory and the money and the attention, but you do not want the scrutiny. That is not how it works. Actually, Ford said, sitting up straighter now, his shoulders squaring, his spine straightening. I can. I absolutely can. I can choose what I want to talk about. I can set boundaries. I can say no. And I am choosing right now, in this moment, not to talk about that. I am choosing to maintain my privacy. I am choosing to keep my personal life personal. Morgan laughed. Not a genuine laugh. Not a laugh of amusement, but a mocking one. A laugh designed to make Ford feel foolish for setting a boundary. A laugh designed to make him feel weak for standing up for himself. You are being awfully sensitive, Harrison. Awfully touchy. I am just asking questions. That is what interviewers do. That is literally my job. That is what I am here for. If you cannot handle a few tough questions, a few hard-hitting questions, maybe you should not be doing interviews. Maybe you should just stay home and let your publicist handle everything. Tough questions. Hard-hitting questions. That is what Morgan called them. But they were not tough questions. They were not hard-hitting. They were insults dressed up as questions. They were attempts to provoke and humiliate. They were cheap shots disguised as journalism. Ford looked at Morgan. On really looked at him, studied him for a moment, and you could see the moment he decided he had had enough. You could see the exact second when something clicked in his mind. His shoulders relaxed slightly, not in surrender, but in resolution. Not in defeat, but in decision. He had made his choice. "You know what, Piers," Ford said, his voice steady and clear and absolutely calm. "I have done a lot of interviews in my life. Hundreds and hundreds of them. Probably more than I can even count. I have sat with people who asked difficult questions. People who challenged me. People who pushed me to think harder about my work, about my choices, about my craft. And I have always respected that. I have always appreciated that. I have always valued that kind of conversation. But what you are doing right now, this thing you are doing, this is not an interview. This is not journalism. This is you trying to make yourself feel important by tearing me down. Like this is you trying to create drama for ratings. This is you using me as a prop in your little show. And I am not interested in participating in that. I am not interested in being disrespected. I am not interested in being your punching bag." Morgan's smile faltered. Just for a second. Just for a brief moment. But it was there. A flicker of uncertainty. A flash of doubt. He had not expected this. He had not expected Ford to push back so directly. Sure, he had not expected his guest to call him out so clearly. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Harrison," Morgan said, trying to regain his footing, trying to recover his composure, trying to take back control of the situation. "Do not be so melodramatic. I am just doing my job. I am just being a journalist. I am just asking the questions that everyone else is thinking, but too afraid to ask. If you cannot take a little heat, if you cannot handle a little pressure, and then maybe you are not as tough as everyone thinks you are. Maybe that tough guy image is just an act." And there it was, the final straw, the comment that would change everything, the words that would end the interview. Ford stood up, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of controlled movement that comes from years of discipline and self-respect and knowing exactly who you are. He reached up and removed the small microphone clipped to his shirt, carefully, methodically, not as if he had all the time in the world, as if there was no rush, as if he was in complete control. Morgan watched, his expression shifting rapidly from smugness to confusion, to something that looked almost like panic. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly. "What are you doing?" Morgan asked, his voice suddenly less confident, less sure of itself. "Harrison, what are you doing? Sit back down. We are not finished here." Ford placed the microphone on the chair, carefully, gently, and then looked directly at Morgan. His gaze was steady. His expression was calm. There was no anger, no rage, just quiet dignity. "I am leaving. This interview is over. I am done here." "You cannot just leave," Morgan sputtered, his composure completely crumbling now, his carefully crafted persona falling apart. "You cannot just walk out like this. We are in the middle of an interview. The cameras are rolling. We have an agreement. You have a contract. You signed papers. And you cannot just walk out." Ford smiled. Not a happy smile, not a friendly smile, but a smile of someone who had just reclaimed their power. A smile of someone who knew their worth. "Watch me." And with that, Harrison Ford turned and walked toward the studio door. Each step was measured, calm, confident. He was not storming off in anger. He was not making a dramatic scene. He was simply refusing to be disrespected any longer. He was simply choosing to leave a situation that was not serving him. Morgan scrambled to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, his carefully crafted persona completely shattered now. "Harrison, come back here. Harrison, stop. Harrison, you are being completely unreasonable. You are overreacting. I was just asking questions. Normal questions, standard questions. You are acting like a child. Come back here right now." But Ford did not stop. He did not turn around. He did not engage. He did not give Morgan the satisfaction of a response. He simply reached the door, opened it with a smooth motion, and walked through it, leaving Morgan standing there, still talking to an empty chair, still pleading with someone who was no longer listening. The crew stood in stunned silence. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew how to react. Nobody had ever seen anything like this. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of Morgan's meltdown, every moment of his panic. "Cut! Cut the cameras!" Morgan shouted, his face red now, his hands shaking, his voice cracking. "Why are you still filming? I said cut! Turn them off! Turn them all off!" But it was too late. Far too late. The moment had been captured. Every second, every word, every expression. Harrison Ford, one of the most iconic actors in Hollywood history, had just walked out of an interview because the host had been so disrespectful, so arrogant, meant so completely out of line that continuing the conversation would have been an insult to Ford's dignity. Morgan paced back and forth, muttering to himself, his hands running through his hair. "This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Who does he think he is? Walking out on my show. My show. I am the one who decides when the interview is over, not him, not the guest. Me. This is completely unprofessional. This is ridiculous. This is insane." One of the producers approached cautiously, carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal. "Piers, maybe we should take a break. Maybe we should, regroup. Figure out what to do next." "A break?" Morgan snapped, his voice sharp and angry. "We do not need a break. We do not need to regroup. We need Harrison Ford back in that chair. We need him to finish this interview. Go get him. Go find him. Tell him he needs to come back. Tell him he is being unreasonable. Tell him he is overreacting. Tell him whatever you need to tell him, but get him back here." The producer shook his head slowly. "I do not think he is coming back, Piers. I really do not think so." Morgan's eyes widened with disbelief. "What do you mean he is not coming back?" "Of course he is coming back. He has to come back. We have a contract. We have an agreement. We have lawyers. He cannot just leave. This is breach of contract. This is unprofessional. He already left." "Piers," the producer said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He walked out. He's gone. He left the building." The reality of the situation began to sink in slowly, like water seeping through cracks. Morgan had pushed too far. He had crossed too many lines. He had asked too many invasive questions. He had made too many insulting comments. He had treated a guest with such blatant disrespect that the guest had chosen to walk away, and in doing so, had made Morgan look like exactly what he was, an entitled bully who thought he could say whatever he wanted without consequences. "This is his fault," Morgan insisted, pointing at the empty chair with a shaking finger. "This is all his fault. He is too sensitive. He is too thin-skinned. He could not handle a real interview. He could not handle real questions. This is on him, not me. I did nothing wrong. I was just doing my job. But nobody in the room was buying it. Not the crew. Not the producers. Not anyone. The crew had heard everything. They had seen everything. They knew exactly whose fault this was. They had watched Morgan push and push and push until Ford had finally had enough. Another producer stepped forward, clipboard in hand, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Piers, we need to talk about how we are going to handle this. We need to figure out our next steps. We cannot just air nothing. We need a plan. We need to figure out what to tell the network, what to tell the audience. Morgan ran his hands through his hair again. His earlier confidence completely evaporated, gone like smoke. Fine. Fine. We will figure something out. Maybe we can edit it somehow. Make it look like, I do not know, like there was a technical issue or something. Like the equipment failed. We can salvage this. We have to salvage this. Salvage what exactly? The producer asked bluntly. Harrison Ford walked out because you insulted him repeatedly, because you attacked his personal life, because you treated him with disrespect. That's what happened. We cannot edit that into something else. We cannot make that disappear. Morgan's face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks. The full weight of what he had done was starting to hit him, starting to sink in. He had just humiliated himself on camera. He had driven away one of the most respected actors in the industry, and one of the biggest names in Hollywood. And there was footage of all of it, every embarrassing second. We have to bury this, Morgan said, his voice desperate now, pleading. We cannot let this get out. We cannot let this footage see the light of day. If people see this, if they see him walking out, if they see what I said, it will make me look bad. Really bad. This will ruin me. It will make you look bad, the producer said flatly, without emotion, because you were bad. You were rude, you were condescending, you were insulting, and you crossed lines that should never be crossed. Harrison Ford did not make you look bad. You made yourself look bad. You did this to yourself. Morgan opened his mouth to argue, to defend himself, to make excuses, but no words came out. Nothing. Silence. What could he say? The producer was right. Every single word of it was true. There was no defense, no excuse, no justification. Meanwhile, somewhere outside the studio, in the parking lot, Harrison Ford was walking to his car with steady, unhurried steps. His expression was calm, peaceful even. He felt no regret about what he had done. In fact, he felt lighter, freer, more at peace. He had stood up for himself. He had refused to be treated poorly. He had set a boundary and enforced it. And that was something worth walking away for. That was something worth protecting. Back in the studio, Morgan slumped into his chair, and the same chair where he had sat just minutes ago, feeling so powerful, so in control, so confident. Now he just felt small, diminished, defeated. What do we tell the network? Someone asked from somewhere in the room. They are going to want answers. They are going to want to know what happened. Morgan did not answer. He could not answer. He just stared at the empty chair across from him. The chair where Harrison Ford had been sitting just moments before. He decided he deserved better than this. Better than being disrespected. Better than being mocked. Better than being used as a prop in someone else's ego trip. The truth was simple. Painfully simple. Morgan had thought he could push a guest around. He had thought he could ask invasive questions, make insulting comments, attack someone's personal life. Wanted to get away with it because he was the host, and this was his show, and he was in charge. But he had been wrong. Completely wrong. Harrison Ford had reminded him, and everyone watching, that respect is not something you can demand. It is something you have to earn. And Morgan had not earned it. Not even close. Not by a mile. The cameras had captured everything. Every uncomfortable moment. The disrespect. The condescension. the entitlement, the arrogance, and most importantly, the moment when a man who had spent decades earning the respect of millions decided he would not tolerate being disrespected for even one more second. Not for ratings, not for content, not for anything. Morgan sat there in silence, finally understanding what he had lost. Not just an interview, not just a guest, not just a segment for his show, but his credibility, his dignity, his reputation as someone who could conduct a professional conversation, his standing in the industry. One of the younger crew members whispered to another behind the cameras, "I cannot believe Harrison Ford just walked out. I have never seen anything like that." "I can believe it," the other replied quietly. "Did you hear what Piers was saying to him? The way he was talking to him? I would have walked out too. Anyone with self-respect would have walked out. And that was the thing. That was the whole point. Anyone with a sense of self-respect. Anyone who valued their dignity. Anyone who refused to be treated as less than human would have walked out. Ford had just been the one with the courage to actually do it. To actually stand up and leave. Morgan finally stood up slowly, his movements heavy and defeated, like someone carrying an enormous weight. Just shut everything down for today. Pack it up. We will deal with this tomorrow. Figure out what to do tomorrow. But there was no dealing with it. There was no fixing it. There was no making it better. What was done was done. The damage was done. Harrison Ford had walked out of Piers Morgan's show, and in that single act, in that single moment of standing up for himself, had shown the world exactly what happens when arrogance meets dignity. When entitlement meets self-respect. When a bully meets someone who refuses to be bullied. Dignity always wins. Always. Every single time.